No, I'd never had this idea at all before Dominic Hill approached me to write something for the slot. It was more like he'd said, you know, we'd really like the writers to do something really imaginative and playful. I can remember him using the phrase that you can have a stampede of elephants if you want to. And that was what really really set me off. It was really after that kind of exchange, basically, that I thought about what I might do or could do. And because I didn't have any characters or a story, my starting point was what kind of play could I write? And then once I thought that, there were kind of two things that immediately came to mind, basically, which is firstly that to write a piece that is inspired quite directly by a genre in the visual arts, basically. Because quite often when I'm talking about theatre that I've seen, I use reference points in the visual arts. So, for example, there was a play by a young author I read last year, and I remember talking to her about how it reminded me of Sam Taylor Wood's work. But I'd never really done that in my own original work, somehow as a starting point. So I'd always been fascinated by the idea of the vanitas in the history of art, and the idea of the memento mori. So that was kind of a really striking thing. And what's really good about the vanitas is that there are kind of three kind of formal kind of parts to it. There's the kind of, classically, there's the skull, there's the hourglass, and then there's the flower. And I started to think, well, actually, you could have kind of three characters that are kind of written out of that energy. And then the other kind of energy that kind of came into it, which is partly where the title of the play comes from. There's kind of one part of the title is to do with the vanitas, where it's called All Is Vanity. And the other part of the title is called All With Apologies to Nathalie Sarraut. Now, Nathalie Sarraut was a French novelist, an existential French novelist, essayist and playwright, poet. And she wrote these series of really mad, quite often quite short plays, which didn't have much physical action, but were kind of vibrantly alive and on the moment. And also were really unafraid to the characters, I suppose because it was French, and the French aren't afraid of serious discussion. The characters were really unafraid of asking big philosophical questions in the plays. And so kind of out of those two energies, I just started writing. And I realised, you know, within about a few lines, that three characters wouldn't be as interesting as four characters. So I had this kind of mysterious other character. And I just wrote the play, and I just wrote it on the moment. It took me about 2 weeks, I think, and then I spent about a week revising it. But I basically really, you know, I really took seriously this thing of trying to kind of to let my imagination let rip and not to self-censor. So it was really important to me to have the courage to write on the moment, to really, really write on the moment, and then to know that once I'd got a draft, that I would then have a much more conscious process of revision. Yeah, I am normally. I mean, this play, as I said, I kind of tried to kind of counteract that. For me, playwriting is normally two completely contradictory energies that I'm managing at the same time in my head. And one is kind of completely impulsive and on the moment. And in a way, kind of particularly writing for performance, you have to do that so that it can go at the speed of an actor's thought and it can exist in the moment for an actor and an audience. But on the other hand, you have to, it has to have kind of meaning and shape to it. It has to, on some level at least, make some sort of sense for an audience. And that's obviously the completely opposite energy that's about the conscious mind crafting. And to me, writing is normally a battle between those two contradictory impulses. And what happened with the writing of this play was I kind of did it, that those two impulses were still in play. It's just that they came about in a different way, which is that on my first draft, I just tried to be all about imagination and writing on the moment. And then in the second draft, it was a very kind of hard, kind of knotty track through the script. Well, I think the reason why I kind of have always, in terms of creative writing, why being a playwright or writing dialogue, I mean, actually, I think that what playwrights do is they write action, of which dialogue is a function. I mean, novelists are often quite rude about playwrights, and they say all that they do is write dialogue. And I always think, actually, we don't. What we do is we write action, and the dialogue is a function of that action. But I think one of the reasons why I feel good and kind of natural about that sort of creative mode, it's just my background. You know, I worked as a market trader as an adolescent, and you just would speak to customers all day. And then when I was a student, I just did telesales, and it just felt very kind of, it felt a very natural way of expression to me, to have characters doing things to each other and saying things to each other. Yeah, I mean, I think generally I've been quite lucky in my background. I mean, when I was growing up, I had a scholarship and an assisted place to a private school, although I came from a very working class family. My dad was a shoemaker. And I hated that growing up, having such a kind of schizophrenic upbringing. But actually, it's a wonderful gift later in life for a writer to have experienced quite working class and middle class areas of society. And I think, you know, I think generally for any writer though, any experience is grist to the mill if you can utilise it. Do you know what I mean? Almost anything that you can do in your life is useful. I mean, writers are such magpies anyway. Plays work on different levels. I mean, the fact is that in the history of the theatre, people have sometimes tried to do away with actors. If you think of Edward Gordon Craig and his marionettes and so forth. But actually, it's always finally returned to the scale of the human form, because our instruments are actors in the theatre, if you like. And I think, you know, the plays that I like most and that I try to write are plays that audiences can access on different levels, and so that audiences take different things away from plays. I think that, you know, I like it, I really like it. I think the theatre is the most kind of democratic of mediums, really, because there's such a broad spectrum of interpretation. And I really like it when audiences come out of a play and they've got different things that they think it's about and what they've taken from it, above and beyond the normal thing of did you like it or didn't you like it. Just in terms of the conceit of the play, I mean, I think that although this play comes from kind of quite a hard-boiled conceptual starting point, you know, in the actual kind of writing of it, it has to be something that finally is actable and that can be inhabited and lived in 3 dimensions by flesh and blood actors. So really, for me, however kind of high concept an idea is, it's finally, you've got to remember that these are kind of human beings that are going to inhabit this, and these are human beings that are going to experience this. And so it wouldn't be of interest to me to following through entirely a kind of an evening that's really plastic. Do you understand what I mean? Yeah, I do. Yeah. Sure. I mean, the playwright David Hare has a lovely phrase where he says the play is in the air, and what that means is that the play is created not just the script, but also the actors and the audience, and that's absolutely right. And of course, you know, if you've written something that's got any richness or complexity to it, then inevitably, and you've got some really good actors and a really good director and designer, then inevitably they show you things that you didn't quite realise were there or didn't realise were there at all. And I think that's quite natural, given that a play comes from both a conscious and a subconscious impulse. Well, I mean, it's really hard to say actually, because I often don't think about character in that way. Like, what are they like? Do you know what I mean? So I never make kind of character sketches in my notes before I start writing, or never construct biographies for them. I'm much more like to find out who the characters are by creating them, by seeing what comes out. So often, you know, I always love it when a character takes you by surprise. So, for example, I had no idea, for example, that Ursula was going to say he took me in a field and fucked me and he stuck his finger up my anus as well.
No, that came as a surprise to when
but it was a surprise to me, you know, but that was because the character was alive and I didn't know what she was going to say. Do you know what I mean? So I like to let the characters find me rather than try to go out and find them. All a character is really anyway is a sum of all the things they do and say. Because a character's not always the same thing as what another character in the drama says about them, actually. That's just what someone else says about them. So for me, that's really exciting, because I think that the theatre is a really democratic and richly interpretive medium. And if you construct a character in that way, then the audience are constructing the character for themselves. I think what you do though in a play quite consciously is you have to think about what the story is that you're telling. And because of this, because you've either kind of a growing kind of knowledge of the story that it is that I'm interested in telling, I think that's when you go back and you revise and you set things up quite consciously. But for me, the kind of creation and growth of a character has to be much, much more organic. The more organic it is, the better, because the more actually it can really live in the moment. What I really like is when the writing is a bit open, so that there are some lines and actions in a play that can only be done one way or said one way. But I really like it. I really like it to kind of to write when I can in a way that's open, that leaves room for an actor to colour it in different ways. Like one of my favourite moments this morning in rehearsals was when the actor playing Ursula, Jane, I think, said, there are 100 different ways I could play this line. And I thought, yeah, that's exactly right there, actually. And I think that's really exciting because you never know what actor you're going to get. So to me, you know, it's really great to have a kind of dramatic writing which kind of has a specificity in the content of the line, but that has a kind of openness about the construction of the line. Yeah, I think there is a lot of open writing in Shakespeare. I mean, I think, but I think that, you know, I don't think I think it's something that is true of a lot of plays anyway. I mean, I think you know, I think sometimes you kind of, it's often true that when the speech is really demotic, like in a David Mamet play or screenplay, then often, and it doesn't make the drama better or worse, it's just different. There's often a very much narrower range of how you can say or play the line. actually when you write in kind of fuller sentences, then there's often a lot more room for actors to colour it in a different way. Oh, the story is just about a woman who has a new beginning. It's really simple. I mean, you know, when I was adapting Festin, we always endlessly had this debate where I would say, well, you know, it's about incest in a family. And they would say, well, no, it's not. It's about 60th birthday party. So, you know, I mean, for me, often the meaning of a play comes about because of the very end of a play. And for me, the end of this play is a moment, is a beginning or a possibility that wasn't there before. So that's kind of what it's all driving towards. Yeah, well, I mean, I think writers laugh for different reasons. I think that you laugh out of delight because an actor's got it absolutely right. So actually you're laughing at something that an audience will never laugh at, and it's not always funny, but it's just delight to hear an actor absolutely hit it. And then there's the laughter because something is funny, so in effect you're laughing at your own joke. That's often kind of said in the theatre, and I understand what that means. It means that you can't play the laugh. But I often think it's quite useful for actors to hear that where the laugh might come. They can't play that laugh, they have to play the truth. But I think it's quite useful. And actually I never used to laugh so much in rehearsals, and I used to suppress my urge to laugh. But actors always told me that they liked it when I laughed because it made them feel good about what they were doing and that they were going in the right direction. I think that readings can be funny sometimes. They can be like what the purpose of a reading is for. But I think within the context of the festival and kind of people getting up with their hangover from their late night comedy and coming to the theatre with their coffee and their breakfast and seeing a reading of a short play, kind of it makes perfect sense. I mean, to be honest, on the larger kind of question, I mean, I think it's kind of any, you know, the more kind of channels of communication, the merrier, really. And my personal kind of politics in what I do is that the theatre is available to kind of and feels available to a kind of wider audience. And that's particularly important to me because I don't come from a in inverted commas middle class background, although I had a very middle class education, and I certainly don't come from a theatre going family. My family go to see my plays, and they go to see the Jersey Boys. They're not a kind of a middle class theatre going family, and I want the theatre to kind of have a broader constituency than sometimes it does.
Well, that's very much what we're trying to do with our filming. Thank you very much. It's brilliant to talk to you.
Thanks very much.
Great.